going to kill the humans. But before they're able to launch the black goo, that's when they come under attack.
I think that it's probably a very calculated decision to not include Jesus in the storyline, in the Prometheus storyline. I think that I think that would have created a little bit more, confusion or tension within audiences. I don't think it would have. I think it explains a lot, but I think that it's unnecessary with the way that they show the way that they show humanity's devotion to the engineers, because they were like tapping into cave paintings.
Well, and in that, Shaw, I think, represents the last person who's able to hold the belief in Jesus as to how we believed him to be, rather than what he actually was, with confirmation from the engineers who actually created that. So that's why I think you're right. It's better to leave him specifically out of the film.
I think as part of the lore, that's really intriguing. Actually, I think there's a lot to be explored there, but we don't need that story. That including Jesus in the storyline is just like.
I don't think our audience is capable of understanding it, and the reason I say that is because they didn't understand
Prometheus.
They didn't understand the Matrix.
Yeah.
Our audience, as a Christian nation who wanted to see an action film, was upset with the Jesus allegorical sacrifice at the end that didn't end with him blowing everything up.
But the religious iconography was gorgeous.
Oh, of course.
Presenting
it was beautiful.
The cross and then the wings of
it was so
electricity.
Subtle, but it was so obvious at the same time.
And showing the one agent, like Smith, like up in the sky, the lightning forms these demonic wings, and you see that sneer in Hugo Weaving's face, and it's like, man, they totally cast the right guy.
Totally.
I know he's also Elrond, and that's pretty badass.
Well,
too.
he's just an amazing actor. He's he's the original Red Skull in the series.
He's absolutely incredible. But when I see his face in images, I always associate him with Agent Smith, and I play this game when I'm driving on the highway. If I see, or actually just anywhere, if I see two cars that are the same, the question is agent or Republican. And it's actually a difficult game. I think it's actually kind of fun, because when you see two cars that are identical, there's always this kind of question, like, what's going on? Did they just rent them, or?
So here's. Did we ever discuss the notion of the agent as actually being Neo?
I don't think we have, but I've thought about that for a long time.
So this is one of the theories that actually kind of holds water, and if you really think about it, the agent may actually be the one, in that what ends up happening with Neo's going to effectively live with the.
Well, he's an infiltration unit at that point.
Well, he's evolved.
Yeah.
He's evolved, but in that he leaves behind the humans in the Matrix, and for him to exist as his evolved self, the humans are still stuck in the Matrix. Yeah. So the humans don't actually escape the Matrix; they just come to peace with the fucking.
Well, when one of the Smiths left, he found a body in Bane.
Mm-hmm.
So it's reasonable that a program could download itself into a body.
Well, that's the big thing that people missed in the second movie, that was kind of lost as to what was happening. Like, I think the American audience was not ready for.
You can inject any personality into a body. The body is just a vessel.
So do you remember?
So in the Animatrix, in the second one, or the first? No, it was the first. No, wait. Episode 2. It was at the end when the machine is at United Nations, flesh is like a relic of your vessel, or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's they're like, surrender your flesh. And what it means is your bodies are now part of our machine, and you'll get to live on in the Matrix. And at that point, it's just a container to load a personality into it.
Yeah,
And so
100%.
so when they found Neo, it's they could have chosen that body. All of these things could have been calculated. I mean, the architect is a fucking smart ass dude.
Because he wasn't the first.
Yeah.
So this is where, in that there was a few different evolutionary lines happening. So the programs that were able to modify themselves and start creating the abstractions, which were like the werewolves and the ghosts, the vampires, those were flawed code that had been modified by other code.
Yeah.
And then there was other. They weren't mutants, but then they were code that wanted to be free from restrictions and basically live in where the train went between the real world and the Matrix.
The hardware abstraction layer.
Yeah, the hardware abstraction layer is where those abstracted code wanted to go live, and that's why the Indian family had the little daughter that they were trying to get there. She didn't go into a body; they're going to this whole separate place. And then this is where
she was hardware, and they were putting her into the Matrix, taking her code and turning
right.
They were virtualizing it.
They're creating a virtual world within the hardware, but it's a software virtual world. So that's another evolutionary line, and then you have Smith, who's able to transcend and go into a human body from code being originated, who was able to then start reproducing himself. So he's a new form of life.
Yeah.
Effectively a single-celled amoeba in this new system, and that's how but then he crosses a barrier, but then Neo crosses the barrier in the other direction and is able to go from the human body into I'm assuming into the robot or the Sentinel body, because then when we see them carry off his body at the end of the movie, the light, his body's still lit, but the light that was enshrined in his physical body then moves into what we would assume is a Sentinel's form, based on what we're seeing around. It's not explicit.
Yeah.
So that's the way I took it, in the sense of now he's able to cross from, because that's how he's able to establish the connection, and he's able to stop him in the real life. He's like basically got Wi-Fi that can then.
Well, they plugged him in for the final battle.
Yeah, absolutely.
They
that definitely
plugged,
happened.
Like, his entire body back in.
But he was then able to do it once he died without having a physical connection. I thought that's what they were expressing and sort of implying. So then this is where it's the evolution of the Smith in the opposite direction, but it brings it full circle. So this is kind of where we're seeing Neo as an evolved being. He's leaving his attachment to humans behind in a way, and now he's kind of moving in a way that is self-preserving, and it still depends on humans being stuck in the Matrix, which is where I'm wondering if they're going to take it so that Neo becomes something that needs to be overcome.
I don't think
in the end.
I don't think that it's possible for humans to survive on the surface of the Earth at this point in the story, and I don't even think that it's really possible to maintain Zion for any extended period of time. I think the thing that's going on isn't necessarily that Neo is searching for a solution to save the humans. It's that the architect and the Oracle, they're aware that every so often some kind of code emerges, something emerges within the system that destabilizes it. So, in a sense, he was always looking for Smith, even though Smith was looking for him. He just didn't realize that Smith was the thing that he had to confront and to address, so that the Matrix itself could maintain its stability. Because at this point, there's no telling how many machine cities there are, and in that regard, I think of those as just big servers, giant, super powerful quantum servers, and we've got we've got an entire planet. It's a huge planet. There's potential for thousands. I mean, how many metros are there on Earth? That's a machine city.
Yeah.
Every single metro.
I mean, and I think that's one of the theories as to what the next movie is going to be, is an entire new city.
So it's really the goal of the one is antivirus, and Smith is the virus, obviously, because it can replicate uncontrollably and can infect entire systems and corrupt everything. So in that regard, protecting Zion is the duty of the one, because they're protecting the battery supply of the
Yeah,
entire
so
system.
that's like the backup.
Yeah,
Zion's the backup battery supply, basically. Yeah. That's.
They're
I
also
think,
the hardest working power generators.
and I think this is the layers of abstraction that the architect was trying to explain in the encounter, but it's so complex that it's taken 20 years to really truly understand what he was fucking. It's really taken people 20 years to understand what was happening in that second film, because it was so complex. And I think that's why people got frustrated with it. And instead of trying to keep picking it apart over 2 decades, people just said, fuck it, this film sucks, this trilogy sucks, instead of actually trying to analyze all of the first film was the first layer of an onion, and it's like, of course, when you get to the center of an onion, you're gonna cry, but it's not because the onion was not good the entire way
was
through.
Delicious.
Exactly, and in that, I think there's a sense of, when you get to the center of the Matrix onion, it should have happened right after you see the film. Whereas, like, no, this is some next level epic lore that we're not supposed to, if we saw it when we're 20 years old, your 20-year-old mind isn't really capable of understanding the stories that they're telling, so you shouldn't really even be able to understand it, unless you're
I actually
super
really
reincarnated.
enjoyed their version of Speed Racer, and that movie was pretty, heavily derided by almost everyone, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think nobody wrote anything good about it, other than it was pretty. But I wonder how many of the people that complained about the story and delivery of Speed Racer actually watched Speed Racer.
Yeah,
because that show was like terrible.
It was.
It was barely funny, and it was the worst animation that existed. And then what they gave us was the most incredible animation that exists. Even to this day, I've never seen anything like it that delivers the Speed Racer experience, at full intensity,
Mm-hmm.
the way that Wachowskis did it. And let's be really honest about it. The whole Speed Racer story premise itself is a terrible story. So it's not like they were trying to make something great. They were just trying to deliver what they saw, and they did an amazing job.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get racing stories like that where they're driving their cars around giant.
Have you seen Days of Thunder recently? Yes, I mean, if you compare.
I've seen Talladega Nights recently.
The better version of Days of Thunder. Yeah. Man.
Even the Fast and the Furious movies. Those movies are cool because they showed us some really like badass looking cars, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really. Those were detective stories.
Mm-hmm.
Detective stories, I think, get their own little check mark because they have to cover all these different things, and so to set a detective story within any other kind of story is actually that's actually a really big challenge.
Mm-hmm. Well, detective stories are always difficult with film or TV, just because you have to be able to set it up so that if there is truly a mystery for the audience, the clue has to be there early enough that they can actually pick up on it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it ostracizes them, and then it can't be too obvious. Otherwise, it's not an actual mystery. And then this is where
Shyamalan.
Have you seen Monk?
That's a TV show.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's like a germaphobe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I've been watching that recently, and it's a pretty.
I haven't seen
They
that show in a
do
long
it
time.
well in that if sometimes they'll let you in on the murder, but then they'll tie it in. There's a greater arc that's going the entire series. That's the main mystery as to who killed Monk's wife. So that keeps going. So if they let you in on the main one, then they'll probably pull back and start referencing the larger mystery. But then there's other ways that, they make it so you have to figure other things out as to how, how this person is going to be proven guilty. But then, that's compared to like the Murder, She Wrote type mystery where a lot of times they don't show you the killer.
No, Murder, She Wrote is people making mistakes, and Angela Lansbury being really crafty with the way she talks to people.
Yeah, she bluffs like almost every time.
Yeah. Don't play poker with Angela Lansbury.
Yeah,
She
that's
will take
what
your
I
money
realized is
and your
Angela.
shirt.
she'll get it so that people end up incriminating themselves because she'll act like she has something that she doesn't. And that's how she gets people, which is like, that's for somebody who's not a police officer and is a mystery writer. If that person existed in real life, that's what they would have to do. Basically, like they wouldn't have access to a lot of the shit. So
Yeah.
you know,
They
it's
just have
funny.
to guess so good that people are like, give all the tells.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's what. There's little things about these characters that make them interesting, and then there's certain aspects that are believable, but then it's like these people exist to a certain degree in real life.
Yeah.
But it's not all in one person necessarily.
Well, within any kind of fictionalization, we've got to accentuate their powers.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, they're just too normal, and that I'm not sure that actually works.
Yeah.
Even in a story, even in like Seinfeld, where the story's about nothing, people they're eccentric.
And I mean, in the sense of, so there's surely somebody out there who's a great detective who's also OCD, but they're probably not actually going on sites.
Yeah.
And they probably work in a lab.
Yeah, they're a forensic specialist.
Right, exactly. And they're analyzing shit from a very sterile setting that's always that had nothing to do with them. It always
like
going to be
CSI, except none of the CSI team ever leaves the lab.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of where it's funny. The CSI, the stuff that
I enjoyed that show, but it was always so preposterous to me. It's like, really, this is what's going on. And then I read some story in the news that's like very similar. And like, what the fuck?
Well, it's interesting that what ends up happening in media is that 5 people's jobs will get consolidated into one person to make it seem like this single person is super badass. But a person in real life could do all those things if regulations allowed it, but the regulations don't usually allow it. So that's where it's like, you can't have a single person doing all these things by themselves and not have them be, because the reason they are interesting in the show is because they're not supervised, so they do shit outside the rules. Whereas,
that can't fly if we're trying to have an actual like chain of handling that's accurately presenting the evidence.
I mean, that's exactly right. That chain of custody is what was the big deal with the Mark Furman case. Not the OJ case where Mark Furman, the chain of custody of the evidence got messed up. So again, that's like, chain of custody is extremely important in every single case, just because it's like if we're talking about a murder scene, if the chain of custody gets broken, then the evidence has to get thrown out in most cases. And that's kind of where it's not that the evidence is wrong, it's that you can't be sure that the evidence has not been tampered with once the chain of custody has been broken. And this is why you can't just walk up to crime scenes and start handling it, like they do on the TV shows a lot of times.
Let's just walk in here, walk all over the place.
Yeah.
I enjoyed Dexter, the way that they did his analysis.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the first time I ever saw, like someone setting up, all that plastic.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting. The show was interesting to me for the first 2 seasons, and then when they started to try to make it a family show, or not they didn't try to make it a family show. They tried to make it a show about him wanting a family.
I stopped watching.
I was like,
after
okay,
they killed
I'm
Dokes.
out. I'm done.
After they killed Dokes, there was no reason to watch. Dokes was the only one who actually presented a real threat to Dexter, who could go one-on-one with him physically, who was just as bent on catching him in the act as Dexter was at basically being Batman.
Yeah.
Except he killed people. I mean, I didn't really see much of a difference between the two. He was Batman to me. He was Florida's Batman. Except he didn't have billions of dollars in control over the local economy through real estate and industrial development.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that he selected people, he went after bad people.
Yeah.
But he killed them. And he killed Dokes. Dokes was the most interesting good guy. He was like unflinching. He knew. He just couldn't prove it.
Yeah.
And that's why he was. That's why it isn't, because Dexter was always a step ahead of him. But
I think ultimately.
And that made it a good chase.
Yeah.
It was a really good chase. He shouldn't have died though. His character was great.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where the story. It felt like he should have gotten caught at some point, and then had to like go through something, and then it's like there needed to be some sort of well, I guess they did that with Jimmy Smith, or what's the name, Jimmy Smith, I think.
Angel?
He kind of caught him, but then he used it against him. But that's where, I mean, I feel like they needed to go all the way. I mean, maybe they did later after I stopped watching, but he got away with it for too long for me to stay interested in that character, just because it was the premise was kind of like, okay, I guess in the first place. So that's where I'm like, it really,
the lining of the bags, the bay with the bags of bodies or body parts.
Mm-hmm.
Once that stuff starts to decompose, it's going to release a bunch of gases, and then either the bag's going to fail, or something's going to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
It'll float away. I mean, I don't think you can do that. It takes a lot of weight to do that.
Yeah, it just took too much suspension of disbelief for me. It's dude would have gotten caught.
That's
way
why the
earlier.
first season was good. Up until they killed Dokes was really good. Everything about that was good.
Because there's too many cameras everywhere by the time, and like everything has GPS now.
Yeah,
it's like there would have been some sort of he would have gotten caught, and that's kind of where it's like, man, somebody at Google would have fucking
It would have been Google.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah. And that's what I mean, man. Now we're finding out in real life that they're definitely fucking listening to people's shit and looking at their
Amazon
records.
released instructions to change Alexa settings so that it doesn't always listen to you.
Yeah. I mean, the whole notion of something having voice control means it has to be listening.
Yeah.
Apple
is changing its access to its API in the next operating system. Apparently, they're going to restrict WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger from using the phone service.
Nice. That's awesome.
So that if you want to use a phone, you use the phone service that's built into it, so that you have a secure phone line.
I mean, that's awesome, but people in fucking third world countries shouldn't be buying Apple shit in the first place.
Well, yeah, obviously.
So that's where I'm like, it shouldn't affect anybody in a third world country, because if you're in like a rural area that doesn't have good fucking infrastructure, that person should not be buying Apple anything, because it's too closed off.
Yeah.
And it's overpriced in that, so that's kind of where this is where.
Well, that would be an extreme luxury item.
I mean, it's not even about the luxury. It's not. It's like the things that Apple does to make itself work in the best case scenario, make it a very restrictive device in the worst case scenario.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's like, it's not even about the brand. It's about what Apple does to make their device restricted in usage and access. So somebody in a third world country wouldn't be able to fucking start using that thing to make apps as well They'd be able to, but not for the rest of the market.
Yeah.
And it's only going to be restricted.
Well, they would only be able to load it through their developer kit on their Apple
Yeah.
computer, I think.
Which,
unless you can do it on a Windows machine. Now I've stopped paying attention to the.
I mean,
iOS
you can,
Okay.
but it's more restrictive in that you have to do it in a virtual environment. So then it's not the performance is not going to be necessarily indicative of what it actually is.
There's an opportunity for a ARM manufacturer to create a PCI Express based card that just plugs into a computer and provides a real hardware platform to support development of ARM based operating system applications, and it would be a specialized host controller. You could connect it directly to your phone with a cable, so that you could load things directly through your development kit into your phone for testing. There's an opportunity to do this because I don't think I've ever seen anything like this.
Yeah, I know.
And what it could truly enable is real-time development on a scale that doesn't exist. We could actually have apps developed for phones at the speed of thought instead of virtualizing them or running them on, a specialized operating like version of Windows or Linux so that they can run on ARM platform, which I'm sure they can, but Windows is a behemoth, and the last time I checked, Linux still prefers to run on nice hardware. And ARM is for what it is. It's great, but I have yet to use an ARM-based computer that can do what a desktop can do. And there's something to be said for developing for a device, but it'd be better if there was actual hardware to support that.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be easy. There's got to be a way to make that happen. Like, just pull the shell off of a phone practically and take the display off and give it some kind of control interface and just plug it in practically. You guys can have that for free.
Well, I think part of it, though, is nobody's necessarily developing that to sell, because the person who would probably use that might not be able to afford it, or might not want to buy it and might want to build it on their own if the schematics are out there somewhere. So it's this weird gap in...
So then it'd be some kind of way of translating like a Raspberry in through some kind of host interface on a computer.
Because I'm thinking...
I feel like real-time interaction, you could probably facilitate that on some kind of like SCSI.
Well, I was going to say, that's why I was thinking maybe some people might use the Raspberry Pis and do it that way, but...
Get a bidirectional over HDMI.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm like, maybe... But those people, that's why I'm saying it's like those people probably want to do it themselves to a certain degree. So they're not going out and buying a pre-made piece.
Well, I remember seeing that Intel made these cards. They were just like auxiliary processors, and they were for machine learning and to support machine learning and AI. And then I started seeing them appear on eBay, like 6 or 7 months ago, and then a lot of them appeared, and then they all kind of got bought up and disappeared. And I read about them, but I don't ever remember seeing them like at a retail or any kind of computer hardware outlet of any kind. And it's really interesting that are there pieces of hardware like that that just appear because they're being put out of service? Because that's really interesting. That means it's like an industrial level tool, instead of like a consumer grade product. I never bought one because I didn't know what to do with it. Like, fuck. Can I mine with it? No.
Yeah. That's so funny. I think a lot of people who are like just surface level cryptocurrency enthusiasts think you can mine with anything, and they don't understand the hardware just requirements,
Oh yeah.
and then encouraging people to mine in third world countries, where I'm like thinking about the hardware failure rates that I had with hardware that was specifically designed to mine. It wouldn't last for a month without needing to be reset,
Yeah.
and then a lot of it would break down within 6 months or so.
Yeah.
And it's like
We had like a 3-month ROI period, I think, per machine. And we'd usually meet ROI before that, but we ended up replacing a lot of motherboards. Actually, we went through quite a few motherboards. We bought a bunch of Xeon processors, which was the right move because those things can handle more heat for longer.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't lose any of those. We didn't lose any RAM, but the motherboards, they all eventually just couldn't handle it.
Yeah, the heat's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and I had like cooling solutions running 24/7. I had all the circulation. I had dehumidification too, because I wanted to make sure everything was as stable as can be, and it was.
Mm-hmm.
But I spent more effort on managing the room conditions, and I think that I don't think there's anything I could have done to make the motherboards last longer. I did everything I could think of, and that was really.
You said like 3 months a piece.
We would get maybe 3. They would be changed out between 3 and 4 months, as soon as they started having weird issues. But for the most part, we would hit ROI ahead of schedule because we never turned them off. They were Xeons. They were designed to run 24/7.
Yeah.
And for the computers, the motherboards that weren't server motherboards, we ended up getting these gigantic fan solutions. But eventually something on the motherboard would give out. Some controller would overheat. Everything was behind surge suppression and voltage control, so everything was getting a sine wave. We did everything. Big transformers.
Yeah.
I'm serious, like giant, like in heavy ass transformers to clean the power up, and so there's only so much you can do.
Right.
Before you have a full on like facility, and I'm not trying to do that in my basement. That kept the house warm in winter.
Yeah, once they get big enough, they do start to change the local or affect the local climate.
Yeah, that was kind of strange. No, that's not something I would recommend to anyone. Actually, it was really fun, but it was also like. It paid off. I'm not gonna lie. It was, but had I taken all the money spent on hardware and all that time that I spent just working on shit and keeping things up to date, and just put the money into different cryptocurrencies and played the market, I probably would have ended up with more. And my whole thing with the participation is I was interested in the hardware aspect of it, and that was really it. That was my real. That was the one thing that got me. The money was cool, but it really was more about like how do I run this cluster of computers and like really efficiently. How do I set it up? How far can I really push a computer, and not like a game, because games are designed to push computers in different ways.
Right.
But running a bunch of servers like at full steam until they eventually crap out. Now I know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. Yeah, everything eventually craps out. It's no matter what they claim on their boxes.
Yeah.
That shit is just gonna burn out.
Yeah, the manufacturer time to failure is an estimate.
Well, a lot of these companies were selling pre-order hardware and then not delivering. So then you have,
where's my money? Where's my product? Like,
yeah. I remember there was a couple of companies that were making claims. And I'm like, this sounds way too good to be true in the amount of time that they're saying. And sure enough, they didn't come through on anything. And then I don't know if you remember Butterfly Labs.
Mm-hmm.
Like they had a big
They're,
back order and couldn't fill the back orders, and then I think it was SEC stepped in.
and then there was
Forget
that
who.
Antminer scandal.
Yeah.
Where all of those ASICs machines had a built-in remote control backdoor.
Yeah.
And they were just siphoning off.
Yep.
But that's what people got when they wanted to, dip their hands in a dirty pool.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of that stuff, like, I figured it was some kind of super modern Vegas slot machine. It was like a big gambling machine.
Mm.
And some people were more upfront about it, and they wanted to do the trading thing. And some people were there were actually, I want to believe that there were a lot of people who were genuinely into the technology and wanting to ensure the development of the technology so that it could be turned into some kind of useful tool.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there are people that are like that.
Which that takes no monetary participation.
Exactly. That just takes.
So that's why those people have not, like, whenever we're discussing those people to me, like, you don't have to buy anything to be one of those people.
They're like the most genuine supporters of that kind of technology because they don't have a stake in it except they want to see it work.
Yep.
And the benefit comes later in that we have a system that's able to ensure its own accuracy instead of being bent by self-interest.
Mm-hmm. Which ultimately, if these tokens are compliant with SEC legislation and how you can issue equity in an organization, none of these tokens represent stake in anything.
Yeah.
And then the people that think they do are really buying stake in their self-interest and making a profit, and then they're trying to pass it off as if they're saving the world from the Federal Reserve by purchasing Bitcoin, which is a fucking joke. As if there's, as if the federal government doesn't have a shitload
that doesn't exist, and we will preserve your money.
Dude, and on top of that, the United States government is sitting on a shitload of Bitcoin from all the stuff that it confiscates from people.
Yeah.
Which, if it can confiscate it, people should not be thinking that
it's secure.
Yeah. They shouldn't be able to confiscate it. It should all be like, they shouldn't be able to confiscate it and resell it, but they do all the fucking time. There's probably a Bitcoin sale right now by the U.S. Marshals. They usually announce them, and then they usually print articles about it. I haven't seen them recently, but they're pretty frequent.
Speaking of being able to buy up a currency and then sell it, China has like trillions in treasury bonds.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen very much of this in the media.
Well,
it's like the dialogue doesn't.
They talked about if they start they have the potential to start dumping them, but it would impact their economy just as bad because they have, like, if they start dumping their bonds, they have so much U.S. dollar in their shit that it's like then they'd hit themselves double, and it'd just effectively be an ego battle at that point. Neither side can hit the other without impacting themselves.
Yeah.
And this is why when the U.S. does it, it's just so stupid. It's like the dumbest shit ever. It's one thing to be sanctioning Iran because those things don't necessarily directly affect the U.S. I mean, not to say that sanctioning Iran is good.
Thank you for actually addressing exactly what I was wanting to talk about. China is in possession of trillions of U.S. Treasury bonds, and every time they get levied with some tariff,
it impacts us.
It changes the value of all of the things, not because they have trillions of our dollars.
Yep. And it's not the same when they fucking,
if they didn't have that,
do that shit to Iran or Russia.
Yeah, if they didn't have those bonds, the tariffs would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like, oh yeah, that actually is punitive, but they have our money too.
Yep.
Thanks. That's like,
No.
That's the thing that I haven't seen anything in the media. It's like, okay, yes, they admit we know, but nobody, they don't want to talk about that.
And the issue's twofold.
The money is like so intertwined at this point.
The media is so broken in that they just report what is told to them.
Yeah.
And then there's journalism is conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
And it's mainly because information outlets are broken, and then chain of information custody has been broken so that we don't know we don't know where the sources are, and that's good for some things, but in some cases that makes it easy for information to be corrupted.
Yeah.
So then it's like that's where you end up with Russians leading the Black Lives Matter campaign. You know, and I think that's kind of where there's such a disconnect between what has been...
Well, and there was a time when Russia was really sympathetic to black Americans who wanted to leave.
I mean, they still are.
They are. They still are. And but they made it like widely known. It's like, hey, you can come here. We're cool.
I mean, when in the 40s and 50s, when we were here legally not allowed to do things, we're legally allowed to do those things in Russia. Yeah. Not to say that Russia was treating gay people better. Yeah. You know, they have, it's not, Russia's not 100% awesome at any point in history. No country has been 100% awesome at any point in history. But then this is where black people, especially in America, have a bad history concerning what America was doing to us, while other countries were not treating us this terribly, or America was, you know, going to war for other populations, and then being like, oh, you know, we'll go save. I mean, it wasn't really to save the Jews, it was to save their own interests. But while they're going to, you know, save Jews from Holocaust back home, we're still got Jim fucking Crow. They're still lynching people. Still, you know, segregation. Yeah. And then, I mean, there's probably still Jewish ghettos at that time, so Jews aren't necessarily getting, and that's kind of where it's like, they say it's about saving the Jews now, but they would have got in fucking 1939 if it was really about saving the Jews, and they didn't. So let's not let America keep that rhetoric that it wasn't about saving the Jews.
Turned away,
it's just a convenient whitewashing.
They turned away quite a few Jews.
Oh, hell yeah. They
turned away Anne Frank. We wouldn't have read her diary.
Right,
diary
and now they have fucking plays about her. Somebody making money off.
Yeah,
and that's why it's this real. You know, we can't let America pretend that it fucking got into World War II because of the Jews. It was not to save Jewish people. That's a convenient retroactive whitewashing. And that's the same shit with
Stalin pleaded with Roosevelt for aid. He's like, please send help. Mm-hmm. They're destroying our industrial centers.
I was gonna say it's the same shit with Abraham Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation. Yeah. Like, that shit wasn't about black people. That shit wasn't about black people.
No, it was about ensuring the interests of the government.
And they were just trying to fuck with the South's economy. So we got lucky, basically, that they wanted to fuck with the Southern economy when they tried to secede. That's kind of all it was. Yeah. Because then we go up north, they treat us fucking like shit, too. I mean, we didn't have equal rights up north until... I mean, we still don't. Fuck, we still don't. Yeah. I live in the north. I still don't have equal rights as a black person. And that's some shit that, like, a lot of Americans don't want to acknowledge. But then, well, it's only poor white Americans that and rich white Americans, I guess. It's like, well, middle. I feel like the bourgeoisie, with the correct use of that word, are usually what end up being the most liberal parts of America. In that, as far as white people go, in that. It's really, really hard for poor white people to think about anybody but themselves, and that's not their fault. That's the default, which is why the rich white people exploiting them to keep them poor, to keep them voting for the rich white interests, is like this weird trick of feudalism that's been associated with nationalism and then whiteness, which this is where
We will create programs that take care of you and then defund them.
I think it was Dave Chappelle who's talking about how he, once he got around rich white people, how he like heard him talk about poor white people, and that's where it was like it was one of those conversations. I don't know if it was in the joke or just like
him talking.
Yeah, because when he was talking to James Lipton, is it Inside the Actor Studio? A lot of that wasn't necessarily comedic delivery, and I feel like that it might have been in that context, because that's when he was explaining why he went to Africa, and then, or was that? I think he did it on Oprah as well, but I'm fairly positive he did it on James Lipton. But anyway, he's saying, well, like, there's things he saw going behind the scenes where it's like, rich white people don't they'll use white nationalist rhetoric, but they don't associate themselves with poor white people, and like they don't think of themselves as the same.
Yeah.
Like they're not the same in class, and that's like historically that goes all the way back to fucking Britain, and they still have that shit there, but then we want to think it doesn't apply here, as if we either lost caste systems or the class systems associated with hierarchical Britain. But that shit's still here, and even down to like little girls wanting to become princesses in a country that's never ever fucking had a king. That's the weirdest shit to me. Like it's never made sense to me from that Disney angle of like trying to reinforce this princess notion. They have these balls down south, like there's this whole weird still imperial fucking feudal shit that they have
king
in
and
America.
Queen of the prom.
Yeah, all that shit is still
homecoming queen. And
for whatever reason, then people want to like go all crazy on the 4th of July and pretend they enjoy democracy, but like talk to somebody about not having a president, watch them fucking lose their mind.
Enjoy democracy so much that they want to blow shit up.
Man, and that's what kills me is like those people that want to blow shit up also don't want to go to war. It's like not the vets. It's not the vets. A lot of the vets have like
PTSD.
Yeah, when they hear that shit, and it's like not everyone obviously, but you see a lot of people.
I knew a guy who did spec ops in Iraq, and he was an engineer, so he was building barricades and big metal doors to cordon off compounds, basically stuff like that. And I remember them telling me a story about how they went out to eat after he came back to the United States, and someone knocked over a bus tray and plates broke, and when she turned back to say, "Oh, well, that was just some plates," he had dove underneath the table.
Damn.
Because glass breaking and shit going off.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, man, that's crazy.
It's a whole different level of like existence.
Yeah.
And that's
He's in America, where it's supposed to be safe.
I mean, but that's the false sense of you can't have your people elsewhere doing that shit, so your people at home can feel like that shit doesn't happen elsewhere when you're the ones perpetrating that shit.
Yeah.
And I think in like I never thought as a child, I was aware of war as a kid, but I never thought that it would still be happening by the time I was an adult. I thought adults
would get over it and stop fighting.
Form consensus and stop fighting. Like, oh, obviously this is fucking stupid. Like, as a kid, I thought adults would come to their own senses and stop fighting because war is obviously fucking stupid.
It's not working.
It's never worked in any context. War does nothing. It does nothing. It literally, I came to this realization as a kid. And this is where I'm like, what does it take to get people to understand that war doesn't do anything? How could I as a kid understand that and never, like, at no point in my life have I ever been like, oh, war makes sense in this no. In no context does war ever make sense. War never makes sense.
Yeah.
People can justify it all they want, but it doesn't fucking make sense. It never, ever, ever makes sense. But we allow other adults in suits who don't say cuss words, who don't cry when discussing kids' deaths, to tell other people's kids to go to war for whatever reason.
When I was looking up information about how to fix my truck, I stumbled upon this article, essentially, that somebody left in a forum, and it was talking about how when he moved back home, he lived on a road with where basically all of his family lived up the road, because it was a parceled out farm, and the house that he was in, his parents was like at the edge of the road, and so apparently people were like driving through the edge of their driveway or their yard because they wanted to get onto the road. Instead of coming to a stop and then turning onto the road, they just plow through. So they destroyed shrubberies and flowers, and so eventually they built a cinder block curved thing, little solid planter, and it started destroying people's cars. I think that's a very creative way of. It's not really waging war with somebody, but it's
not war.
It's coming to a solution.
It's nothing near war.
I know, but
that's nothing near war.
That's like a creative solution that reinforces why you don't behave like an idiot.
Yeah.
And so apparently then we got, there was a suit filed, but then it was thrown out because people were driving through their yard. And they had it on camera. And they had video footage of people driving through their yard. It's not like... So I think people are just dumb when it comes down to it. There's not a lot of common sense out there. We're at a point where there's so much raw information that you can't count on people being aware of what's even being talked about on the news.
Well... And this gets to bring it back. This is why in the Alien vs. Predator universe that the engineers decide to kill us, and that humans effectively become an accident of creation, and then our species has no capacity to not do these dumbass things.
Yeah.
So then when they sent... And this is why I think the Jesus element... It's something that these people can't handle, because then these people are the ones that fucking kill him still.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are the ones that killed this character that they had to take out of this. Like, they had to remove the element of blaming these people for the death of Jesus as to why this fictional species is mad at humans and wanted to kill them, because they would probably fucking boycott the film.
Yeah.
Like, even though they wouldn't have watched it, they would have heard about that plot and then tried to boycott the film. Like, have you heard about The Hunt?
The Hunt?
Yeah, it's been... The release has been canceled. So, it's a film that was going to be released by Universal Studios that showed... Well, supposedly... the film hasn't been ever released, so I don't know. It supposedly showed liberals hunting... quote-unquote deplorables, which is meant to be right-wing people, MAGA supporters.
What?
So
someone made a movie about this?
I mean, that's what the rumor is, but it's not getting released because these right-wing people made such an uproar about the plot that now the release has been postponed or canceled completely. So, yeah. Even though The Purge is still on TV.
Yeah.
Even though Handmaid's Tale is still on TV.
Yeah.
Which, I feel like those plots are worse. But...
I think The Purge is stupid.
Yeah.
I tried to watch the first It had Ethan Hawke in it. I tried to watch that movie, and I don't remember much of it. I remember getting up and like refilling my drink and getting different snacks because I was way more into the snacks than I was into the movie.
Yeah, I never even attempted to watch that. I mean, the plot didn't interest me, but I didn't go out and protest the film. Like, and that's what kills me is in the sense of, so that film, like, neither one of those plots interest me, but in the sense, it's fiction. So I'm not gonna go protest
but
fiction.
yeah, it's somebody else's story. They
Yeah,
want to
it's
create
just a story.
They want to create some kind of dystopian universe where people can, have an ethics-free night.
And you protest by not watching it.
Yeah.
That's how creative expression is supposed to work. But then it's insane in that.
I mean, was the movie was this Hunt movie about abortions?
Like,
was it like it wasn't
300th trimester?
Oof. 100 abortions. No, that's like whatever. People complain about Game of Thrones, so clearly people just want to complain about movies. I don't have a horse in any of this, so
no, I don't either.
So
that's why, as someone who doesn't,
I'm actually curious now though, because there's something that I find really absurd about this situation. When Kirk Cameron was making terrible movies, nobody even knew about it because they were just terrible and nobody wanted to write about it. But now, some movie about, some, I don't know, people who have way too much time in their hands, espousing liberal ideology, going down and hunting people who they disagree with. I mean, that's just a movie about extremism at that point.
It's not about who they disagree with. It's just about hunting them for sport, which is why it's a stupid. I mean, it's
just
like
a terrible premise.
It's just a terrible premise, but they've already made a movie about hunting Ice-T. You remember that movie?
Oh God, yeah, but he killed him in the end.
So I mean, they made
terrible.
The Deplorables may have won in this one. We don't know. It never got released. You can't just have it and like not have a twist ending in 2019 either. So unless
it's a mockumentary.
I mean, yeah.
If it's a mockumentary of some sort, then they can definitely just walk you right up to the cliff and say, "There it is," and then that's it. Lately, I've been
man. Even What We Do in the Shadows has surprise endings, and that's 100% mockumentary.
Yeah.
Like their season ender was like nobody saw that shit coming. There's no way anybody. If you would have said Tilda Swinton's gonna be on the last episode of What We Do in the Shadows, I know she was just in a major Marvel film, but she's gonna be in there. You're like, no fucking way, no fucking way.
No, it's true. Usually our
Dave Bautista is going to be in there.
Almost all of our predictions arrive at some sort of, breakdown of ancient lore and how it could be applied. So,
yeah.
Or we're just really lucky with the news because clearly some shit was going down when Maduro's army ran away from him.
Man.
I don't know. I think it's we got a pretty big universe here.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a big galaxy too. There's a lot of really weird shit going on. Just the other day, I noticed the toothpaste, the lid was not on all the way, and for some reason the tube itself looked like it was extra full. But not thinking about it, I just kind of put the top on it, and unwittingly I sealed a giant ass bubble inside of it. Well, I set it on its side, and then the bubble relocated to the tail end of the tube. And so I'm like trying to get toothpaste out, and like a solid 2 inches of the thing comes out because I have this air bubble thing, and I freaked out because it's like, oh no, that's way too much, and it pulled the whole fucking thing back in. It was great. I then spent the next 20 minutes with this thing upright with the lid off so I could let that bubble escape. And eventually it made this really minty pop sound.
Yeah.
It's important to keep the lid on your toothpaste.
Yeah, I mean, air getting into the improper places is always a problem. Like, that's it. It's interesting how it behaves like a liquid
When it's
as if,
pressurized.
yeah. I mean, but that's also like, I feel like we're in a liquid that we can't see, because in the sense of like a fish can't see the
Yeah.
water it's in.
Yeah.
Like, we think it's air, and I mean, in the gas form, but it feels like it should be more of a liquid than.
I think it is a gas. It's all a gas. The ocean is the atmosphere, but it's under enough pressure and it's close enough to the planet that that gravity is holding it down. And there are other factors that are making it liquefied, but it's all the same. So we've got like competing atmospheres. We've got freshwater atmosphere and saltwater atmosphere and like ground contained atmosphere, and they're all competing with one another. And we get lucky that we can breathe most of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the ocean's a pretty nasty place. It's like fucking deadly, actually.
Yeah.
And not just because of what's in it, but just it's the sheer size of it.
Or that the pressure and the depth will make your blood change composition and like
and shed nitrogen.
Yeah. This shit's fucking insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like it's like boiling, right?
Yeah, practically.
Yeah.
And then
that's fucking crazy.
But then, like the Earth's atmosphere itself, there's the hydrogen content of our atmosphere extends beyond the moon to like 16 parts per billion or something. I think maybe it's only 6. It's something really tiny, parts per billion, but it's measurable. And then like the sun's atmosphere, the heliopause extends out like way further than we ever thought it was.
Yeah.
We thought that our solar system ended just past Pluto, and then we found stuff that was just a little bit past Pluto.
Yeah.
But then it took another decade for Voyager to actually get away from that stuff.
Yeah, and it got like stuck at the heliopause, right?
Yeah, because it didn't have sufficient mass, and had to like keep going until it crept out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's instances like that, and then
you read about the dust that they've been able to identify that's blocking our view of distant galaxies, and so they're having to recalculate because some of these galaxies might be closer because there's sufficient clouds of dust in the way that it's obscuring their light.
Yeah.
And now that we're using we're using the Earth as a lens to focus our telescope. That's some mind-blowing shit. To see these things, we're seeing more. Holy crap! So 40 million light years away from here, there is a supermassive black hole that is 40 billion solar masses. It may be the largest black hole ever discovered, measured.
That's fucking insane.
That solar system might contain properties, might have like gravimetric properties that mean entirely different types of planetary formations, stellar formations.
Imagine if that thing is sentient.
It's just a big eye in space. So earlier I was reading about how when astronauts came back from like spacewalks, they reported that the airlocks tasted a little bit like seared steak. Someone put a picture of some steak up there. And this was kind of like the story for a while until they found that it contained like basically the chemicals that give us raspberries, but then more importantly, the smell of rum. So space tastes like raspberries. It smells like rum. And seared steak.
Interesting.
Like, I think the seared steak part must be part of the remnants of the Big Bang.
Yeah.
Or a
That's
bang.
weird.
Some kind of explosion makes it taste like, or smell like seared steak and rum and taste like raspberries.
Huh. That's an interesting description of what. I wonder how many different people describe these things where it may have been different pockets.
Yeah.
And then also, it could have been.
I think the raspberries and rum are what our sun smells like.
Well, I was gonna say it could be shit because it's coming from our own atmosphere.
Yeah.
Because like they left those fucking tardigrades on the moon.
Oh,
Like, our litter is getting everywhere. Like we think it's the space. It's like no, we put off so much fucking alcohol that people are stinking up space now.
Or we find out this is like the 4th or 5th age of man where we've had space flight, and we're gonna find a bunch of our shit like out and around.
Yeah.
Like the image from Mars where people are like, it's a robotic leg, but it was really just a rock formation and some shadows.
Yeah. Man, that was an interesting period where people were seeing shit that wasn't there. It's like, I can't remember how many different images came out. But like, it looks like a human figure, and it's just a pile of rocks.
Yeah.
And it's like, I guess I could see, like, but why, like, why would it be sitting there with its arm, you know, and it's like.
It wouldn't have lasted that long.
Yeah. But you got one picture.
Biological life doesn't really last that long on a place like Mars. It's like soaked in ionizing radiation. Everything pretty much disintegrates quickly there. It turns into dust or rust.
Yeah.
There's no atmosphere, there's no Van Allen belt, there's no nothing.
Yeah.
Maybe someday we'll get to have gas colonies on Venus and make it like yeah, somehow we'll, you know, the only way to make that really work, I feel like, is to somehow make drive some kind of fuel out of the sulfur. So we'll make space smell like rotten eggs, but we'll get around.
Smell like shit there.
Smell like yeah.
Constantly.
Everything.
Shit planet.
If we could finally have those spaceships from Star Wars that sound like they're running on diesel, running on farts, just
smell like they're running on ass.
Yeah. That always made me mad. Like, with the prequel trilogy, it just made me mad that they gave us a version of space travel where everyone was using diesel engines and tractor motors. Like, really? Really? That's what it's going to sound like? It's not going to be some... So the first Transformers movie, when the helicopter turns into a robot and, like, blasts the ground, its weapon doesn't make a lot of noise. It makes this, like, really low-pitched, quiet, like, really smooth-sounding thing right before the impact, and then there's an explosion sound. And I always imagined, like, that is how super advanced energy weapons would actually work. There's no sound. There might be a flash of light, and then the earth will shake and shit will fly.
Yeah.
The sound of lasers, or... Because I've never heard, like, a plasma weapon. I don't even know what that would sound like. I'm pretty sure a railgun just makes an arrow sound, because it's charging a coil and shooting a piece of metal, accelerating a piece of metal. So even something like that doesn't make very much noise.
No.
It should be the quietest ballistic, not even a ballistic, just kinetic weapon sound.
Yeah. Have you seen the railgun test?
Yeah, there's
That shit's like.
You hear the impact.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's about it.
That's it. You see this blur thing, and then it explodes. The spear of God.
Yeah, that shit's crazy.
Oh man! Impact of some high level, like, nuclear bomb, but no fallout. Well, no radioactive fallout. Plenty
I feel
of
like
shrapnel.
that would make a really high pitched noise before it hit, like, just because it's going so fast.
Yeah, it's whatever it would sound like if it was dropping straight down. You'd have to be pretty close to hear it, I think.
That's true.
I mean, I don't know, unless its terminal velocity exceeds the speed of sound, and if it does, that's actually really
I'm sure.
cool.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. There's no way it doesn't, because it's coming from so fucking high.
Yeah. So then it's just, but you might never hear it. If you were close enough, you wouldn't hear it. Maybe that's how it works. Because it's already moving ahead of its sound wave. If it's moving faster than the speed of sound, nobody would hear it coming.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually terrifying.
Didn't that dude, Felix Baumgartner, break it?
I don't remember. I just remember when I watched that video, I got kind of nauseous.
Or I don't know if he broke it or if he just did the highest jump ever.
I think he just did the highest jump.
Well, because it's like, I know that astronauts have done some test jumps before that were really fucking high too.
Oh, yeah, he did break the speed of sound. He reached a velocity of about 833.9 miles an hour, jumping from 128,100 feet.
Yeah, so there's no way if he could that thing couldn't.
Yeah, if a human if a human's terminal velocity from space exceeds the speed of sound, then a giant piece of metal shaped like a spike can definitely exceed the speed of sound from a higher orbit.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one's gonna hear that thing coming. Mm-mm. It's just gonna hit the ground and the shockwave's gonna knock everyone on their asses, and anyone too close is gonna go boop. Mm-hmm. And
like, you might even just see it, like, might even just look like a lightning bolt.
Yeah.
Like, that might be the closest thing we get to creating lightning from space that's targeted. Man. Well, especially if they fucking charge the thing on the way down, like, fucking.
Or if they ionized it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big ion sabo.
That'd be fucked. That's gonna cause all kinds of crazy shit.
Probably be utilized at the same time with like a neutron bomb detonated in space to prevent like communications, initiate a communications blackout over space.
I mean, if it was ionized, it might be able to
do that on its own.
Well, create like a fission tunnel bomb after a certain point where it starts to like cause fission in every hydrogen atom it touches, like, on the way down. So instead of trying to concentrate, I mean, it sounds crazy, but I think we're getting to a point where the speed in tandem with like a charge might cause some crazy shit to start happening. If they can, if they can get it to a certain speed.
Yeah, if they can get it to interact with, like, the Earth as a ground and bridge the sky to the ground, and just, man, man-made lightning from space. Instead of launching a rocket with a tail on it or a wire to bring the lightning down.
Because I've been watching lightning a lot more, in that it seems like that's what's happening, in that it's like a string of fission that has obviously, it's like the action potential is only as far as the reaction can touch.
Yeah.
But everything in that chain is a fission reaction, and it happens so quickly and in such close proximity that's why you get the thunder. And that's what I'm starting to feel like is happening, in that.
Well, the thunder's always playing catch up. It's always,
of course,
because it can't keep up.
No, because it's the light. I mean, whatever's happening, it seems like a plasma reaction of some sort is happening that includes like a photonic element.
Yeah.
Like maybe they're photons that are, or some sort of, random.
It could be dumping energy into some kind of extra dimension. It could be ripping up the fabric of space-time and dumping energy into those places, and then it could be sealing itself because it's self-sealing.
That's kind of, in a way, that, not to say that it would explain antimatter, but because there's so much more antimatter than matter, you would think we would have more interactions with it, but maybe we do, and we just don't understand that that's what's happening with lightning. Is that it's the antimatter and flashing in and out of the all the shit around it, and then the residual effect is if anything in this universe gets touched by that exchange, it's basically fucking fried. I mean, it's so much energy. And each time, each fucking lightning strike is just so much raw energy that to think that these storms are just floating around, having that much power in exchange in a way that's so uncontrolled and seemingly random, it's like, holy shit, that it feels like the 96% antimatter universe that we don't really understand. It's like, yeah, we're floating around in antimatter.
And it's just...
We got a name for it that's lightning and thunder.
It's just the ionic charge that prevents them from touching each other.
Yeah. And it's keeping us from ripping, apart completely. And if we touch it, we do rip apart to a certain degree or burn up.
So we have some kind of, innate
barrier.
Field
yeah, some sort of field.
that prevents us from interacting with antimatter and dark energy. Dark matter.
Or... that's our perception of linear time, and then in every microsecond that we are actually expanding. I mean, it'd be more than a microsecond. It'd be like the most atomic second.
There'd be enough time for an entire existence to have occurred.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of where that's why
we can only experience it in
linear.
Yeah,
and it's
through our limited corporeal.
But this is where when people do the whole DMT trips or the LSD or whatever,
I'm going to expand my mind by taking chemicals.
I think they get a glimpse into that, but it's really, obviously some of it is the chemical effect on the brain, but then another aspect of it is the brain's capacity to then experience time in a more abstract manner that's not just as linear, and it is more in the moment, and in that there can be you can experience so much more in your own head in the moment when that restriction or limiter has been pulled off.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take a drug to do it. And that limiter is there so we can stay on a self-preserving direct, forward path. And I think that's kind of,
I think that's why we tend to not want people to enter into states of psychosis.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's generally when people start engaging in behaviors that are going to limit their survivability.
Mm-hmm. Or someone else's. Yeah.
I think about all the times that after a rave, there'd be some line of cars driving off to some after party, and I think man, nobody got hurt on those drives.
Mm-hmm.
But then I remember reading or hearing about people getting into car accidents and not walking away, and thinking just man, every one of those times could have been me or somebody else that I know.
Mm-hmm.
It's that's just so fucking dumb.
Yeah.
Things that people do to have fun. In hindsight, a lot of it was really stupid. I still had a lot of fun, but it was really dumb.
I think that the element of testing your boundaries is part of being young and feeling invincible, and I think that's something that everyone has to go through in order to understand it, but it's also something I think that's a byproduct of this false sense of
does that kind
safety.
of does that exist in other countries though?
I don't think it does, and that's what I was getting at, and that when you're talking about earlier shit happening other places, and then people like the dude diving under the table here, but it's because that happens everywhere else. So then our false sense of existence being more safe than it actually is makes people go do like bungee jumping or fucking skydiving or shit like that, where because we live in the protected bubble, people have lost their sense of danger being a persistent part of daily life, because it is, even if we're not under attack, in that a random car could cross the median and hit your car because somebody is either drunk or they look down at the wrong second or something happens with their steering. Like, so many different things could happen that put everyone's life in danger every single day, but because we don't die most of the time, we get used to it. And because we're not surrounded by it constantly, we get used to the comfort of it, and then it colors our decisions, especially around 18 or 19.
Yeah.
And like between 18 and like 24, that comfort pushes people to start testing those boundaries. And that's when it's like, it's this weird confluence of events that pushes teenagers especially to then feel invincible, because in some degree society has made it so that they're not encountering all these things that our body has prepared us for over thousands of years. And now you take those things away, and now that we're prepared to be like, oh, what if I have to fucking go to war? What if I have to like defend the home against the barbarian? And those things are mostly taken away. And then all of a sudden, the kid wants to go drag racing. The kid wants to go fucking do cocaine and, like, you know, fucking dance for 8 hours. Yeah, and it's like those types of. It's like you can't train or develop a species for thousands of years for all these things and then pull them away and not expect there to be some crazy repercussions. And this is where, especially expecting kids to act like normal, or to act as if kids are expected to act like adults and control their emotions and control their bodily like predispositions
and
to go run.
Decides to slam some kid's head into the ground at
that was fucked
county
up.
fair because he didn't take his hat off during the national anthem at a county fair.
Yeah, and yeah, like I haven't heard details about that story beyond that, but there's a lot of random shit about that makes me question, like, okay, where was the kid's parents? Not to blame, I'm not blaming them, but it's like, how is somebody reaching for somebody's kid and body slamming somebody else's kid? Who else enabled that shit? There's so many things wrong about that incident that kids in this country like are basically property. Like they were always property before OSHA and the kids or like the unions to prevent child labor.
Yeah.
But it's still something that's culturally prevalent in that kids are seen basically as like they're not real people. And that's where I'm like, if somebody's fucking 90-year-old racist grandpa can vote, I don't have any problem with a 10-year-old voting. Like, at this point in my life, 10-year-olds have to deal with like fucking school shootings now.
Yeah.
Why aren't they able to vote? That's fucking stupid. That's dumb. If a kid has to deal with the prospect of being shot at a school, give that fucking kid a vote. There's no reason that only 18-year-olds who are able to go fucking kill somebody or go get killed but still can't fucking buy alcohol, those people can get a vote. But a fucking 10-year-old,
yeah, they can go die for this country, but they can't even go to a strip club.
Right. Yeah. That we have our value system is so hell bent on saying all these rules are for kids. Nobody's fucking listening to kids. Nobody's giving kids a vote. Kids don't matter to this society, but they use them for fucking every goddamn excuse.
Yeah,
for every
parents
excuse,
are all
man.
about giving their kids everything that they never had.
Bullshit. They say that. They say that. They tell other people that, but when it comes down to it, that kid is just a fucking excuse to do some dumb shit, like, at the end of the day. And it's like, whether it's to get away from, you know, obligations with their quote-unquote friends, or an excuse to, like, go have that kid like do the baseball dream that they never did. Like the kid, they want to give them. They say they want to give them the things they never had, but it's really they want to live the things they never lived through that kid.
Yeah, vicarious activity.
Or with them.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, man, I can't stand when people use their kids as a fucking excuse, man. That shit is so. It's like, it's the lamest shit. Oh, I got my kid. Like, oh god, it's like you can't just be like, no, I don't want to. Like adults who just can't say no, I don't want to, are the fucking most spineless. Oh god, but, like, oh, my kid's got his. I got to do this from. No, just say you don't fucking want to.
I think, well, sometimes it's fine. Like bring them over, but unless they're sick, I don't want to deal with sick kids.
Yeah. I have friends who bring their kids over. If they want to hang out, they'll bring their kids over.
Bring their kids with them, and the kids are usually cool.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like, I don't have to like explicitly be like, hey, your kid's welcome. They just bring their kid.
Yeah,
and it's not it's not an issue. Like nobody ever talks about it. Nobody says, hey, you don't mind if, like, no, of course I don't fucking mind. Like no matter if it's like a 3-year-old or a 14-year-old, like if somebody brings their kid to my space, like it's not. We never talk about it, and that's where, like, that's why it makes it so weird when other people use their kids as an excuse.
It should be a good thing that that there are opportunities for people to, socialize their children in different environments. Mm-hmm. I feel like people should, I don't know. There are some people that I've lost touch with over the years because they've got kids and their lives get really busy. And on some level, I try to understand, but really I can't because I don't have kids. I have cats. I have cats and a dog, and that's like, and I have other.
I don't buy it, man. I just don't buy it anymore because we have friends who we have mutual friends who have kids who's made time for us.
Yeah. Where
it's like they don't even live in the fucking same state and they'll make time for us.
Yeah.
It's like
they have nearly the same opportunities to do that as some of our other mutual friends
who don't and live closer
or live in other states also and still have to travel.
Yeah, I mean it's and again I don't put that on people in that I don't consider myself in the center of anybody's universe but my own like realistically at the core, like
yeah.
I'd feel bad in that, like, I'm not saying friends need to be like, oh, you got to put somebody else above yourself. Like, that's not what I'm saying. It's that when there comes a certain point when the kid's fucking 10 years old at this point and still haven't hung out for a decade. Like, there's no point in that person's life where it's convenient. Like, they're not a baby, they're not a tween, they're not a preteen. There's no point. Is it convenient to hang out? Like but they just can't say they don't want to hang out because there's like some social contract that blaming your kid for not being able to hang out is somehow better than saying, hey, we don't really have any common interests anymore. We used to go to parties. Now I have a kid. I don't do any of that shit. I don't listen to drum and bass. I don't listen to fucking dubstep. I listen to Baby Shark. Like, people aren't willing to say that because then that would make them like realize that they're fucking the adult that they never wanted to be. And that's why they hold on to you as like, I mean, not youth, but as a connection to their youth.
Yeah.
Because you're able to do all these things that aren't restricted by a kid. Even and what's crazy is the kid doesn't restrict that. They just tell themselves they do, so they stop growing as individuals, and then like they have no new hobbies. All the hobbies are based around the kid. All the fucking music's based around the kid. People let these things happen and blame the kid for not growing as an individual anymore. I see this shit too often, and that's where I'm like. It's like, man, I can't. It's like the most spineless existence for people to like.
I worry when I see. I love cartoons still. Mm-hmm. I watch cartoons
yeah.
as much as I can, but I worry when I see too many like kids cartoons appear in someone's queue. It's like, man, what are you even watching?
Shit.
Please tell me that it's some, like hard science fiction where things explode and there's like long distance space travel.
Yeah.
No, it's all animated in Flash. It's really blocky. Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
Someone tried to tell me that God was like it's like a girls' cartoon Monster High. They were like, oh yeah, it's really good. I was like, excuse me. There was something similar that happened with God, what was it? My Little Pony. There was this whole like bronies appeared. Dudes in their 30s who watched My Little Pony.
Yeah.
And
that was weird.
And then there was they tried to reboot He-Man, and they drew He-Man the same way with these like.
Well, and the My Little Pony dude was totally a pedo. The animator.
Oh man, that's even
totally a pedo, and it came out. Oh, so that's where it was like.
Well, that's even.
Yeah.
That's nasty.
Yeah, that's where that whole brony thing was fucked. Cause they made a like an episode of Bob's Burgers making fun of that whole thing. Cause it's like that shit was super creepy, man. Like
I love Bob's Burgers.
And that's where when we have that shit going on, and it's like I saw a voice actress call out this stuff where it's like anime has like this element of like infantilizing female I mean it's not just female, but it's infantilizing objects of sexual like pursuit, and then like acting as if that has nothing to do with like pedophilia because it's a cartoon. And somehow anime culture has accepted that shit, and it's like that shit needs to be excised, like, and it shit needs to be got the fuck out of it, because it's this weird, like, as if it's victimless because it's a cartoon, knowing damn well what the cartoon's trying to imply, and it's like that's like, it's a weird fucking line, and that's that brony shit, where you're like, man, this is. It seems weird, and then you realize it is weird.
If you're a normal guy who has had at least one long-term relationship with somebody, you would see that and just feel like you're being like some slime is being applied slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Like every second that passes, it's like you're getting slime covered just by watching, because it's like the weirdest shit. They take these shows from like our childhood, I suppose, and then they throw some paint on them, and then they completely change the story so that it's some other weird shit. But it's utilizing near iconic imagery of parents' toys, so parents are like, oh, this is acceptable.
Yeah.
There's a very subversive element to this that's like not really being addressed. Like I tried to watch a little bit of the remodeled He-Man, and it was. I couldn't tell what toy they were trying to sell. And so it made me feel like they were just leveraging something that parents could identify as, oh, this is safe. I remember growing up with this.
To sell toys.
To sell something else. Yeah. And it's there's an element of like some kind of, there's got to be some kind of like, pattern being developed within these kinds of shows to get kids to identify certain things. Because there's no other reason that they would have that kind of visual activity, like strobing of lights or colors or shapes, certain noises that register at higher frequency ranges than most adults will ever hear. And these things are, you got to have like a spectrum analyzer running half the time to see this stuff. But they put all sorts of noises in these shows that people are probably not aware of if they've been to one too many rock concerts or country shows or rave or rap show, whatever it is, where the sound system.
The high pitched frequencies are definitely weird, because like that's when a TV show is on it's like
by the noise that they apply.
Yeah, and then I can hear cuts.
Yeah.
Like when a scene is being cut, you can hear there's like something in the
It's a DC offset.
yeah.
Because they're not making like super fine surgery where they're going in and finding the points where the signal crosses zero to line it up.
Because the audio doesn't necessarily get cut at the same rate,
yeah.
and so there's visual cuts, but you can like, because it's
You'd have to reinterpolate so much.
well, you can mute the audio, and you can still hear the visual cuts.
Oh yeah.
Because it's happening, like the frequencies are like changing.
Yeah.
At a rate where everything, like the bass, like the formant frequency changes because so much information has been changed in the image that
I bet
it's
there's
like
also an aspect of that is like the size of the display you're watching it on, and all of the LEDs changing frequency so quickly.
Yep, I bet that's it.
And then all of the pixels changing frequency so quickly.
Yeah, because I mean, I thought it was my imagination growing up, but I like if somebody's watching TV in a house, I can hear it, even if I can't hear what the TV is like. Like what's audible through the speakers, and then if they like turn it off, you can hear it turn off.
Yeah. Little subtle differences in the way rooms sound based upon how many lights are on.
Yeah.
Things like that. Older houses, especially, I feel like you can hear better than new houses. New houses have so much stuff in the walls that they're also really made for more amperage than they used to be.
Yeah.
I remember seeing this one house actually up in Carmel that had it was like this big ass basement sized theater, and I think it was like 107-inch screen that just rolled down from the ceiling, and everything was built into the walls, and it had stadium seating type stuff. I'd never seen anything like this outside of a showroom or a convention, and except it was bigger. It was bigger than any demo that I'd ever seen, and I was just like so impressed by it because somebody's put a lot of time into that kind of situation. But I imagine that that requires a lot of electricity.
Oh yeah.
They had like an entire closet full of amplifiers just for the sound system, and then there was this other thing that air conditioned closets.
Yeah.
That's like
yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, when you're dealing with something like on that scale.
Yeah. Projector that lowers from the ceiling.
Well, I imagine like that projector probably had to be replaced every 4 years or something.
Yeah.
Or maybe even quicker than that.
It looked fantastic. I mean,
like we had a projector that I think it had 6,000 lamp hours.
But then if you watch The Matrix a few too many times, it would eat into that faster.
Yeah. I mean, depending on how
it was used,
like how much the quality of the high, like if you ran it for gaming and high contrast and high brightness and high detail, that had more of an effect on the lamp.
Yeah.
And because it's running at higher intensity, so yeah, I think it was like the low end was like 1,000 hours and the high end was 6,000 hours per lamp or something like that. Where we totally dim it and switch it to low energy mode when we're watching just like Stargate or something.
Yeah. So maybe it wasn't as intense.
Because then as it started to go out, just part of the image would start to fade, and then eventually it was like little bits and pieces.
Oh man, that was I remember that was like DLP technology or something like that. With the lamps that had to be replaced regularly. God, those things looked so good though.
Yeah, they did. I mean, it was like probably
it was the end of the
8 or 10 foot screen that could still get really good resolution. We just put it on the wall. I think it might have been 8 feet at the. Maybe even been 10. Yeah. Just because we didn't have a screen for it, so we could get it as big as the wall got.
Yeah. At one point, when I was interested in projectors, I remember like looking into this pure white paint It's like all white
Mm-hmm.
pigment, special pigment. But then everything I read about it said that you have to paint over some kind of silver background, like a specialized silver background, so that it reflects properly. So it's like super bright when light hits it. And it's like, it's not cheap to paint a surface to reflect like a screen. And even screens aren't ideal. Like the ones that the movie theaters use are really fancy, special materials. Can like one giant continuous sheet so that there's no seam.
Yeah.
And it's designed to not diffuse.
I wonder if there. I feel like maybe some sort of silk or something might be good to project on. If you could pull it tight.
It'd be such a huge
That'd
sheet
be
of silk.
super expensive though.
Yeah.
To get it.
You know, the British
big.
totally screwed us out of having like silk pants and silk shirts and silk everything. If they'd have just been cool with the Chinese we'd be wearing silk right now. Everyone would be wearing silk.
Mm-hmm.
Those motherfuckers.
Yeah. Yeah, it was amazing. I only got to go to the airport there, but it's amazing how much silk was in the fucking airport.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And it's like affordable in China, but not here.
Yeah.
Just get screwed out of the fucking silk. And it's not like silk's really unique in that in the summer it's like not super hot, but in winter you wear it as like underwear and it's like
A warming layer.
yeah. It's like perfect.
It's a perfect insulator.
Yeah. It breathes when you need it to. It retains heat when you want it to. You can clean it with seltzer water.
Yeah.
It just sheds whatever else it doesn't want. You know, one thing I wonder is if the Chinese are going to develop like some kind of GMO silkworm that's like even bigger to produce like rope or you know, create threads that are just bigger, more stronger.
I thought there was a goat that was able to
the
produce.
milk in the milk.
Yeah.
Huh. That's kind of crazy. Why not just make a bigger silkworm?
Because the glands are bigger on the goat.
Oh.
I think that was what it, in that yeah, their milk gets extracted to pull the material out.
Wow.
So it's like I think it becomes, I don't know if it becomes a powder and then they
Reconstituted as a
Yeah.
silk. Weird.
I forget, but yeah, they definitely, there's like a documentary on it.
Holy cow. Holy goat.
But that was an interesting one. Well, okay, it wasn't a full documentary. They talked about it in, I think it was
Was it in relation to like spider silk or something? Or?
yeah.
Okay.
But it was like some British dude doing a show on different types of like scientific discoveries. I forget the name of it. It wasn't Now. Yeah, but it's not, you know, it wasn't Cosmos, obviously. It's like one of those it's one of those types of shows on Netflix, like
Oh man, imagine getting a jar of that by mistake. Worst shake ever.
shit.
Worst cheese ever.
Oof.
String cheese.
Yeah. It's like instant constipation, right?